They support you when you're weak, but disappear when you start winning. Have you ever noticed something strange? Some people are always around when your life is falling apart. They answer your calls when you're anxious. They listen patiently when you complain. They sit beside you when you feel lost, confused, and broken. But the moment your life starts improving, the moment you gain confidence, the moment you stop needing help, they slowly disappear. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just quietly. And that silence hurts more than any betrayal, because these were not strangers. These were people you trusted, people you opened up to, people you thought were happy for you, but they weren't. And today, we are going to talk about a truth most people are not ready to hear. Some people don't hate you. They don't wish you harm. They don't want you to fail. They just don't want you to succeed, at least not beyond them. When you were struggling, you made them feel comfortable. Your weakness made them feel strong. Your confusion made them feel wise. Your failures made them feel ahead. Without saying it out loud, your pain gave them a quiet sense of importance. They became the listener, the advisor, the emotional support. And as long as you stayed broken, the role in your life remained secure. But then something changed. You stopped calling as much. You stopped asking for validation. You started trusting yourself. And instead of being proud of you, they felt threatened because your growth removed their position. You didn't need saving anymore. And to insecure people, being needed is more important than being loved. Let me ask you something honestly. Why do some people comfort you when you cry, but feel awkward when you smile? Why do they listen closely to your problems, but change the subject when you talk about progress? Why do they encourage you to rest, right when you're finally disciplined? Why do they say, "You've changed"? The moment you start respecting yourself, that is not coincidence. That is exposure. Here's a hard truth. Some people build emotional connections with your weakness, not with your potential. They don't bond with who you can become. They bond with who you were when you were lost. So when you rise, you break the relationship they were comfortable with. And they don't know how to handle that. They won't always attack you. They won't always criticize you directly. Instead, they do something more subtle. They withdraw. They become distant. They become cold. They become uninterested. Your success reminds them of everything they avoided becoming. And instead of facing themselves, they distance themselves from you. This is why your growth feels lonely. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because growth separates alignment. People who are connected to your pain cannot follow you into your strength. And that realization hurts, because you thought support meant loyalty. You thought presence meant sincerity. You thought closeness meant love. But sometimes it only meant convenience. The most painful part? They were never lying to you. They genuinely cared, but only for the version of you that made them feel relevant. They liked you broken. They liked you unsure. They liked you dependent, not because they are evil, but because they are afraid of their own stagnation. Your growth forces them to confront their life, and not everyone is brave enough for that. So if you've ever wondered why certain people stopped calling after your life improved, why some friends vanished after you found confidence, why family members became distant when you stopped needing help, this video is for you. Because what you are experiencing is not abandonment, it is revelation. Stay with me, because once you understand this, you will stop chasing people who were only loyal to your pain, and you will never feel guilty for growing again. Main body. There is something most people never question. Why were certain people always emotionally available when you were struggling, but emotionally absent when you started improving? It's because weakness creates hierarchy. When you are broken, the roles are clear. There is the one who needs help and the one who gives it. The one who listens and the one who unloads pain. The one who seeks direction and the one who offers advice. And for many people, that position feels powerful. Not in an obvious way, not in a cruel way, but in a quiet, internal way. When you were weak, they felt needed. Your problems gave them purpose. Your confusion gave them relevance. Your emotional dependence gave them a role in your life. And without realizing it, your pain became the foundation of the relationship. That foundation felt stable because it was predictable. They knew who you were when you were broken. They knew how to interact with that version of you. They knew what to say, what to offer, and when to step in. But growth destroys predictability. When you started healing, something shifted. You stopped asking for permission. You stopped needing reassurance. You stopped explaining yourself. And suddenly they didn't know where they stood anymore. Because the relationship was never built on equality. It was built on imbalance. This is the part people struggle to accept. Some people don't want partners in growth. They want dependence, not because they are bad people, but because equality forces self-reflection. When you grow, the relationship becomes a mirror, and mirrors are uncomfortable for people who avoid themselves. Your improvement silently asks a question. If you can rise from this, why haven't I? That question creates pressure, and pressure exposes insecurity. That's why your success doesn't always receive applause. Sometimes it receives silence, sometimes distance, sometimes subtle resistance. Not because your success is wrong, but because it threatens their self-image. You see, as long as you were struggling, they didn't have to change. They could stay where they were, without feeling behind. But the moment you move forward, their stillness became visible, and visibility creates discomfort. This is where the dynamic begins to break. They stop engaging deeply. They stop showing curiosity about your goals. They stop celebrating small wins. Instead, they say things like, "Don't rush, take it easy. Why are you doing so much?" Not because they care about your balance, but because your momentum reminds them of their inertia. Here's something important to understand. They are not consciously sabotaging you. Most of the time, they don't even realize what they're doing. Their nervous system feels threatened, so they pull away. Their ego feels exposed, so they create distance. And when distance isn't enough, they use language. You've changed. You're not the same anymore. You don't spend time like before. But what they really mean is, you no longer play the role I was comfortable with. Growth changes the power balance. When you were weak, you needed them. Now you don't. And for some people, losing that need feels like rejection. Even though you didn't reject them, you simply evolved. This is where guilt enters the picture. They make you feel selfish for growing, arrogant for improving, distant for focusing on yourself. But growth is not abandonment. Healing is not betrayal. And independence is not disrespect. The truth is simple but painful. Some relationships survive only as long as one person stays small. The moment you outgrow that size, the connection begins to crack. This doesn't mean they never cared. It means they cared about a version of you that no longer exists, and that loss confuses them. Now here's the part that hurts the most. They were never cheering against you. They just weren't cheering for you either. They wanted you stable. Not rising, comfortable, not powerful, dependent, not free. And when you became free, they didn't know where to place themselves in your life. So instead of adjusting, they exited quietly. If you're listening to this and feeling pain, understand this. Their absence is not a punishment. It's confirmation. Confirmation that your growth exposed the truth of the connection. Some people are meant to support you through survival, not transformation. Some people are meant to witness your struggle, not your strength. And that is not failure. That is alignment correcting itself. In the next part, we will talk about the clear behavioral signs that reveal who was attached to your weakness and who genuinely supports your growth. Because once you see the patterns, you will never unsee them. The signs they were attached to your weakness. There are always signs. The problem is not that the signs don't exist. The problem is that we ignore them because we want the relationship to be real. But once you start growing, these signs become impossible to miss. Let's talk about them. Sign 1, they stop asking about your goals. When you were struggling, they asked many questions. How are you feeling? What happened? What are you going to do now? But when you start improving, those questions disappear. They no longer ask where you're going. They don't ask what you're building. They don't ask what excites you. Not because they forgot, but because your direction makes them uncomfortable. Your goals remind them of what they postponed. Sign 2, they minimize your progress. You share something positive, a small win, a breakthrough, and instead of encouragement you hear, "That's normal. Anyone could do that." Don't get ahead of yourself. They don't criticize loudly. They shrink your success quietly. because acknowledging your progress would mean admitting their stagnation. Sign 3. They were louder during your pain than your success. Think carefully. Who showed up when you were breaking down? Who listened for hours when you were lost? Now ask yourself, who celebrates your wins with the same energy? Silence after success is louder than comfort during pain, because pain made them feel useful. Success makes them feel unnecessary. Sign 4. They label your growth as change. You've changed. This sentence is rarely neutral. It's not an observation. It's a complaint. They are not saying you became worse. They are saying you became unfamiliar. And unfamiliar means uncontrollable. You no longer react the way you used to. You no longer explain yourself endlessly. You no longer tolerate emotional imbalance. That loss of access feels threatening. Sign 5. They miss the old you, not the healthy you. They say things like, I miss how you used to be. You were more fun before. You were more available back then. What they miss is not you. They miss the version of you that needed them. The version that doubted itself. The version that asked for permission. The version that stayed small. Sign 6. They become passive instead of present. They don't argue. They don't confront you. They don't express happiness either. They simply fade. Late replies. Short conversations. Less effort. This passive withdrawal is not coincidence. It's avoidance. Avoidance of comparison. Avoidance of self-reflection. Avoidance of accountability. Sign 7. Your confidence makes them uncomfortable. When you speak with certainty, they shift. When you stand firm, they resist. When you stop apologizing for existing, they feel exposed. Confidence removes the imbalance that once favored them, and not everyone wants equality. Sign 8. They subtly question your motives. You think you're better now? Who do you think you are? Why are you acting like this? These are not jokes. They are defenses. Defenses against the fear that you no longer need approval. Sign 9. They support you only when you're vulnerable. Notice this carefully. They engage deeply when you're anxious. They show concern when you're overwhelmed. They listen when you doubt yourself. But when you're stable, focused, and grounded, they disengage, because stability doesn't feed their role. Sign 10. They create guilt around your growth. You don't have time anymore. You forgot about us. You changed your priorities. Growth always demands focus, but instead of respecting it, they personalize it. They interpret your evolution as abandonment. Here's the truth most people avoid. Not everyone is meant to grow with you. Some people are meant to meet you at a certain version of yourself and stay there. This doesn't make them villains. It makes them incompatible with your future. And incompatibility often reveals itself when one person rises and the other stays. If you recognize these signs, don't panic. Awareness is not rejection. It's clarity. You are not responsible for maintaining relationships that only survive your suffering. You are not obligated to stay small so others feel comfortable. In the final part, we will talk about what to do next, how to let go without anger, how to protect your progress, how to move forward without guilt. Because understanding is only the beginning, letting go without guilt. There comes a moment in growth when holding on hurts more than letting go, not because the relationship was bad, but because it no longer fits who you are becoming. And this is where most people struggle. They don't struggle with loss. They struggle with guilt. You start asking yourself questions like, am I being selfish? Should I slow down for them? Am I abandoning people who were there for me? And these questions can trap you in a version of yourself you've already outgrown. Let's make one thing very clear. Outgrowing people is not betrayal. It's a natural consequence of evolution. You didn't change to hurt anyone. You changed to survive, to heal, to become whole. And anyone who truly cares about you will want that for you, even if it challenges them. Here is the truth that brings peace. You are not responsible for how your growth makes others feel. You are responsible for how you honor your own life. Some people were meant to support you during a chapter of pain, but they were never meant to walk with you into purpose. And that doesn't erase what they did for you. It simply means the season has ended. The problem begins when you confuse gratitude with obligation. Gratitude says, I appreciate what you gave me. Obligation says, I must stay small to repay you. And obligation is not love. It is self-abandonment. Growth requires boundaries, not loud boundaries, not aggressive boundaries, but quiet, firm boundaries. The kind where you stop over-explaining. The kind where you stop shrinking your dreams. The kind where you stop apologizing for choosing yourself. Here's something important to understand. People who benefited from your weakness will resist your boundaries, because boundaries remove access. And access was the foundation of the relationship they were comfortable with. You don't need to argue. You don't need to explain. You don't need to justify your growth. Clarity does not require permission. There is a deep peace that comes when you stop trying to be understood by people who only knew your pain. Not everyone will recognize your evolution, and that's okay, because recognition is not required for transformation. Some people will never say goodbye. They will simply fade, and instead of chasing closure, you must learn to accept silence as the answer. Silence is not rejection, it is information. It tells you where alignment no longer exists. When you stop forcing connection, something powerful happens. Your energy returns, your focus sharpens, your confidence stabilizes. You begin to feel lighter, not because people left, but because resistance did. Let me say this clearly. If someone disappears when you start winning, they were never walking beside you. They were standing still while you moved. Growth will always cost you something: comfort, familiarity, certain relationships. But what it gives you in return is worth everything. Self-respect, clarity, peace. The right people do not compete with your growth. They don't feel threatened by your healing. They don't resent your success. They adjust. They evolve. They celebrate. And if they can't, they step aside with dignity. That is real support. You don't need many people. You need aligned people. People who don't need you broken to feel important. People who don't attach their value to your dependency. People who want to grow, not just be needed. And when those people arrive, you will understand why others had to leave. Until then, protect your progress, honor your journey, and never apologize for becoming someone who no longer fits old expectations. Because the version of you who stayed small to keep others comfortable was not the real you. The real you was waiting on the other side of courage. Final message. Some people were meant to witness your struggle, not your success. Some people were meant to help you survive, not rise. And that doesn't make the story tragic. It makes it complete. Final line, close. If they disappear when you start winning, let them go. They were never meant to walk with the version of you who was born to grow.